Jasmine Washington is experiencing another pregnancy thanks to Kirk Frost, and Rasheeda's emotional breakdown has been revealed. In the Frost household, there was a palpable sense of tension in the air. Maintaining her composure was something that Rasheeda had always worked hard to do, since she was known to her admirers and following as a figure who was strong and resilient. It was this moment, however, that her world was shook. An additional kid had been born to Jasmine Washington and Kirk Frost, her husband of more than 20 years, according to the news that had reached the public. Rasheeda had the impression that she was standing in the middle of a storm as the headlines became sensationalized, the whispers of gossip turned into a roar, and the rumors reached a crescendo. Rasheeda had put in a lot of effort over the course of many years to work on building her family, her music, her fashion business, and her brand. Despite the fact that she and Kirk had gone through a number of ups and downs in the past, this betrayal was much more profound than any of their previous transgressions. Rasheeda found herself confronting her feelings in ways that she had never done before. She struggled with feelings of anger, despair, and a deeper sense of betrayal than she had ever experienced before. 1. A revelation from God. It was the most unexpected way that the news was revealed. Over the course of one evening, Rasheeda was at her boutique when she received a message from a close friend that was somewhat mysterious. The message stated, "Have you heard the news?" and included a link to a website that specializes in gossip. She was half expecting some little gossip when she clicked on it, and her hands were shaking as she did so. It was instead the huge headline that read, "Kirk Frost becomes father again with Jasmine Washington." Her mind was unable to understand the words that were displayed on the screen, and she became momentarily frozen. It seemed unreal to me. She believed that they had moved on from all that had happened between them, that Kirk had grown as a result of the anguish that his previous infidelity had brought her. However, now that she was confronted with this information, she felt as though her entire world was falling apart. Despite the fact that Kirk had been an integral part of her life, including being her business partner, her spouse, and the father of her children, he had once again deceived her. She experienced a range of emotions, including numbness, bewilderment, and finally rage, which she hadn't experienced in many years. She threw her phone down, scarcely noting the worried expressions on staff members' faces as she did so. 2. The breakdown of emotional control. The journey back to my house that evening was a haze. She discovered that she was wandering around the home, and her mind was filled with old recollections. All of the rooms resounded with the sounds of late-night chats, dreams, and laughs that had been shared. In spite of this, those times feel empty now since Kirk's betrayal has stained them. At long last, she collapsed in her bedroom by herself. She allowed herself to experience the raw anguish that she had been suppressing while tears flowed down her face. She had been holding back the pain. She felt the burden of betrayal pressing down on her shoulders, which shattered her determination. The journey that they had taken together, the commitments that they had made to each other, and all of the sacrifices that she had made over the years were all things that she reflected on. She had built her life around him and had faith in him, despite the fact that that was something that other people had cautioned her against. The realization dawned on her at that very instant that this was not only about Jasmine Washington. The topic at hand was Kirk and the decisions that he continued to make. Not once, but on multiple occasions, he had betrayed her confidence, and the anguish was so intense that it was almost insurmountable. On the other hand, the realization that he did not appear to regard her commitment and dedication as much as she had prized him was even more painful than the first disappointment. 3. Having a fight with Kirk. The following morning, Rasheeda made the decision that it was time to confront Kirk. She could not stand the idea of continuing this debate for much longer than it already had been. He was making coffee in the kitchen when she discovered him there, fully oblivious to the tempest that was brewing inside of her. "Kirk," she whispered, her voice barely audible above a whisper but infused with a great deal of feeling. After looking up and making eye contact with her, he had an instantaneous realization that something was amiss. She displayed her phone in front of him, the headline staring him in the face, before he could even come up with a response. Just as he took a step back, his hands began to tremble slightly and he became pale. "Is it true?" she screamed, her voice breaking under the strain of the tension that she was experiencing. As Kirk attempted to explain, rationalize, and transfer blame onto circumstances, he stumbled over his words and stumbled over his understanding. Rasheeda, on the other hand, was not interested in hearing any justifications. All of them had been heard by her previously, but this time they had an empty feeling to them. She inquired, "How many times, Kirk?" with a tone that was a combination of rage and despondency in her voice. "What is the number of times that you are going to betray me? What is the minimum number of times that I need to forgive you before you take responsibility for the harm that you are causing?" During the pause that followed, Rasheeda experienced a peculiar sensation of clarity. Kirk did not provide a response. She became aware of the possibility that he would never alter his conduct and that perhaps his pattern of behavior was something that he was not yet prepared to confront with himself. 4. A choice to achieve healing. Rasheeda passed through a roller coaster of feelings throughout the course of the subsequent several days. She would waver between wanting to salvage their marriage for the sake of their children and wanting to finally put herself first. She would then go back and forth between the two desires. She received messages from her friends and relatives, some of whom encouraged her to leave Kirk and begin a new life, while others brought to her attention the life that they had created together. After everything was said and done, Rasheeda was aware that she could not base her choices on the judgments of other people. She had to do what was best for her peace of mind, and for her future by listening to her own heart and figuring out what was best for her. Rasheeda made the decision to give herself some time, to remove herself from the constant commotion, and to concentrate on her own recovery. By spending time with her children, she was able to draw strength from the love that they enjoyed together. The act of writing down her thoughts in a journal, which she began doing, eventually turned into a type of therapy for her. The sorrow, the lessons, and the journey that had gotten her to this point were all things that she would examine on a daily basis as she reflected on her experiences over the year. 5. Recognizing and regaining her strength. In the course of the weeks that passed, Rasheeda experienced a growing sense of lucidity. She came to the realization that her connections, particularly with Kirk, had always been the driving force behind her self-definition. Now, however, she realized that she was more than simply a wife or a partner. She was a powerful and self-reliant woman who had established an empire and was cherished by her followers. It was true that the betrayal had rattled her, but it had also served to remind her of the resiliency she possessed. In addition to rediscovering her enthusiasm for music and fashion, she started devoting more time to her business, putting her energy into new ideas, and investing more time in her firm. Her supporters were able to recognize the transformation that she had undergone, and they came together to offer her words of support and encouragement. In the course of each day that passed, Rasheeda became more resilient and discovered a fresh sense of purpose. She was aware that the path to recovery would not be an easy one, but she was prepared to face the challenges that lay ahead. Reclaiming her life on her own terms, reestablishing her sense of herself, and establishing a future that was not dependent on Kirk's errors were all things that she was resolute to accomplish. Moving onward and upward. After a few months had passed, Rasheeda had finally made up her mind regarding her marriage. She was aware that forgiving others was a necessary step in the healing process for her, but she was also aware that she needed to establish boundaries for her own health and happiness. In an open and honest chat with Kirk, she laid out her expectations and made it quite apparent that in order for him to have a future with her, he would need to undergo a transformation. It seems like Kirk had finally come to terms with the seriousness of the consequences of his conduct. Specifically, he pledged to work on himself, to attend therapy, and to make atonement for his actions. However, Rasheeda was no longer clinging to the promises that he had made. Regardless of whether or not he was present, She was intent on her own trip and prepared to move forward. She had a sense of serenity that she had been searching for many years as she brought this chapter of her life to an end. She had tackled her anxieties and her pain, and as a result, she emerged from the experience more powerful than before. Additionally, as she contemplated the future, she was confident that she would be okay regardless of the circumstances. She was Rasheeda, a lady who possessed both power and resilience, as well as an infinite potential. In addition, she was prepared to confront whatever life presented her with, and she was willing to do so on her own terms. This is the epilogue, a fresh start. After a few months had passed, Rasheeda was sitting in her office, reviewing the blueprints for her upcoming clothesline. Her intellect was more clear than it had been in years, and her heart made her feel lighter. The life, the identity, and the sense of self-worth that she had lost had all been restored by her. And despite the fact that she had no idea what the future had for her and Kirk, she was no longer defined by the actions that he had taken. For the first time in her life, Rasheeda had discovered her power, her voice, and her passion. Being aware of the fact that she had the ability to determine her own fate, she was prepared to deal with whatever the future revealed.